I stood in the center of a dusty trading post, wrists bound with rough rope that had already rubbed my skin raw, surrounded by men who looked at me like I was nothing more than a burden to be offloaded. The summer heat pressed down on everything, making the air shimmer and dance above the wooden floorboards. My father, if I could even call him that anymore, stood beside the postmaster, counting coins with fingers that trembled slightly. He wouldn't look at me. Hadn't looked at me since my mother died 6 months ago. "This one's young," a gravelly voice said from somewhere to my left, "strong enough for labor." "He'll do whatever you need him to do," my father replied, his voice flat and emotionless. "Good with horses, quiet, won't cause trouble." I wanted to spit at his feet. I wanted to scream that I wasn't property, that my mother would have burned this place to the ground before letting this happen. But I stayed silent, keeping my eyes fixed on a knot in the floorboard beneath my feet, because what good would fighting do now? I was Nakai, son of a Dene woman and a white trader who decided that whiskey and gambling debts were more important than his own blood. The door to the trading post swung open with enough force to make everyone turn. He walked in like he owned not just the building but the entire territory, and maybe he did. He was massive, easily 6'5", with shoulders that seemed to fill the doorway and a presence that made the air itself feel heavier. A worn cowboy hat shadowed his face, but I could see the sharp line of his jaw, dusted with several days' worth of stubble and lips pressed into a hard line. His clothes were trail-worn but well-made. A dark leather vest over a shirt that had once been white, pants that had seen 1,000 miles of riding, and boots that had clearly kicked in more than a few doors. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. When he pushed his hat back slightly, I saw them, storm gray, intense, and fixed directly on me with an expression I couldn't read. Not disgust like the other men, not calculation like my father, something else entirely, something that made my pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "That him," his voice was deep, rough around the edges like whiskey poured over gravel. The postmaster nodded quickly, nervously. "Yes, Mr. Coulter, just like you asked, young, healthy, no family to come looking." I didn't ask for a sales pitch, Dutch. The giant Coulter stepped closer, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. I asked if that was him. Dutch swallowed hard. "Yes, sir, that's him." Coulter moved toward me with surprising grace for someone his size, each step deliberate and measured. The other men in the trading post seemed to shrink back without even realizing it, giving him a wide berth. My father finally looked up, his roomy eyes showing a flash of something, maybe guilt, maybe just fear, before he looked away again. When Coulter stopped in front of me, I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. Up close, I could see the weathering on his face, the small scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the flecks of blue in those gray eyes. He smelled like leather and pine, and something clean, like rain on stone. "What's your name?" he asked. I hesitated. Giving him my name felt like giving him power, but then again, he was about to own me anyway. "Nakai," I said quietly, "Nakai Ashkiai." Something shifted in his expression, just a flicker, there and gone so fast I almost missed it. "Nakai," he repeated, and the way he said it, with care and precision, made something in my chest tighten. "How old are you?" 18, 19 in 3 months. He nodded slowly, his gaze traveling over me, not leering like the other men had done, but assessing, taking inventory. "You work with horses?" "Yes. You good with them?" "Better than most." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost like he wanted to smile but had forgotten how. "We'll see about that." He turned to my father without another glance at me, the agreed price. My father's hand shook as he held out a piece of paper. $50, like we discussed." $50, Coulter repeated flatly. He pulled out a leather pouch from his vest, counted out the money with quick, efficient movements, and dropped it into my father's waiting palm. The coins clinked together, the sound of my life being reduced to a transaction. "He got any belongings?" "Just what he's wearing." Coulter's jaw tightened. For a moment I thought he might say something, but instead he just cut the ropes binding my wrists with a knife that appeared and disappeared from his hand so quickly I barely saw it. The rope fell away, and I rubbed at the raw, angry marks it had left behind. "Can you ride?" he asked me. "Yes." "Then let's go." He turned toward the door, clearly expecting me to follow. I looked back once at my father, who was already counting his money, his face carefully blank. There was nothing left to say. Whatever connection we'd once had, thin as it was, had been severed the moment those coins changed hands. So I turned away from him, from the trading post, from the only life I'd ever known, and followed the giant stranger out into the blinding New Mexico sun. Two horses waited outside, a massive black stallion that looked like it could run through a wall, and a smaller chestnut mare with intelligent eyes. Coulter swung up onto the stallion with easy confidence, then looked down at me. "You take the mare, her name's Sage. Treat her well and she'll take care of you." I approached Sage slowly, letting her smell my hand before I touched her neck. She was beautiful, well cared for, her coat glossy despite the dust. When I mounted, she shifted beneath me but didn't protest, as if she understood I belonged there. Coulter watched me settle into the saddle, that unreadable expression still on his face. Then he clicked his tongue, and the stallion started moving. I followed, leaving behind the trading post, my father, and everything I'd ever been. We rode in silence for what felt like hours. The landscape stretched out around us, endless sky, rolling hills dotted with sage and juniper, red rock formations rising like ancient monuments in the distance. The sun beat down mercilessly, but I was used to it. What I wasn't used to was the man riding ahead of me, his broad back straight and tall in the saddle, his presence somehow filling the entire landscape. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, he slowed his horse until we were riding side by side. "You scared?" he asked without looking at me. The question surprised me. Should I be? Now he did look at me, and something in those gray eyes made my breath catch. "No," he said firmly, "you shouldn't be. I bought your debt, Nakai, not you. You understand the difference." I wasn't sure I did. Not really. It's quiet for a moment, and I watched his hands on the reins, large, calloused, scarred in places, hands that had clearly seen hard work and harder fights. "Your father owed money to some dangerous people, men who would have sold you to someone a hell of a lot worse than me. So I bought his debt and took you off the table." He finally met my eyes again. "You're not my slave. You're not my property. You work for me, you pay off what your father owed, and then you're free to go wherever you want." Something in my chest loosened slightly, though suspicions still coiled tight. "Why would you do that?" His jaw worked for a moment, like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. "Let's just say I've got my reasons." He looked away toward the horizon. "My ranch is about 2 hours north. You'll have your own room in the bunkhouse, 3 meals a day and fair wages. You do your work and don't cause trouble, we'll get a long fine. And if I want to leave before the debt's paid?" His expression hardened. "Then those men your father owes will come looking for you, and trust me, you don't want that." He glanced at me again. "I'm the better option, Nakai. I know that's not saying much, but it's the truth." I didn't know if I believed him. Didn't know if I could trust a single word from a man who just bought me like livestock. But as the sun continued to set and the temperature began to drop, as Sage moved steadily beneath me and the giant cowboy rode at my side in a silence that felt almost companionable, I realized something that scared me more than anything else that had happened today. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to trust that those gray eyes held something other than cruelty, and that wanting, that tiny, desperate hope, felt more dangerous than any threat he could have made. Because hope, as my mother used to say, was the most painful thing to lose. The Coulter Ranch appeared as darkness fell, lights glowing warm against the deep purple sky. It was larger than I'd expected, a sprawling collection of buildings including a main house, a massive barn, several corrals, and what looked like a bunkhouse set slightly apart from everything else. Cattle dotted the distant hills, dark shapes against the twilight, and I could hear horses moving restlessly in the nearest corral. Coulter led us straight to the barn, which was clean and well organized in a way that spoke of someone who took pride in their work. He dismounted and began unsaddling his stallion with practiced efficiency, so I did the same with Sage, my muscles protesting slightly from the long ride. I wasn't soft, I'd worked hard my entire life, but it had been a while since I'd spent this many hours in a saddle. You know how to brush down a horse properly? Coulter asked without looking at me. Yes, show me. It felt like a test, so I took my time, working carefully through Sage's coat, checking her hooves, making sure she had fresh water and feed. I could feel Coulter watching me the entire time, that intense gaze tracking my every movement. When I finally finished, I turned to find him leaning against a support beam, arms crossed over his broad chest, expression thoughtful. You weren't lying, he said. You're good with them. Something warm flickered in my chest at the approval in his voice, which was ridiculous. I shouldn't care what this man thought of me. My mother taught me. She said horses were honest in a way people rarely are. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was, my throat tightened. She died 6 months ago. After that, my father. I trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence. Coulter's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I'm sorry. He pushed off the beam and gestured toward the door. Come on, I'll show you where you'll be staying. The bunkhouse was simple but comfortable, 4 beds, a wood stove, a table with chairs, and windows that looked out toward the main house. 2 of the beds were clearly occupied, personal belongings scattered nearby, but the other 2 were empty with fresh linens folded at the foot. You'll be in here with my 2 ranch hands, Pete and Samuel, Coulter explained. They're both good men. They'll show you the ropes, teach you how things work around here. He moved to a chest in the corner and pulled out some clothing, shirts, pants, a warm jacket. These should fit well enough. You can wash up in the pump house behind the barn. Breakfast is at dawn in the main house kitchen. I took the clothes, the fabric rough but clean under my fingers. Thank you. He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind those gray eyes. In the lamplight, I could see the fatigue in his face, the lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled less than he should. There was something almost sad about him, something lonely that called to the lonely parts of me. Get some rest, he said finally. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He turned toward the door, then paused. Nakai, you're safe here. Whatever you're running from, whatever you're afraid of, it doesn't reach onto my land. You understand? My throat felt tight. Why do you care? His jaw worked again, that tell I was beginning to recognize as him wrestling with words. Maybe I'm just tired of watching people get destroyed by things they didn't choose. He pulled his hat down slightly, shadowing his face. Good night. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, and I was alone in the bunkhouse with clothes that smelled like cedar and sage and questions I didn't have answers for. I changed out of my dusty clothes, washed as best I could with the cold water from the pump, and climbed into the bed that was apparently mine. The mattress was more comfortable than anything I'd slept on in months, the blankets warm and heavy. Through the window, I could see lights still burning in the main house, and I wondered what Coulter was doing right now, if he lived alone in that big house, if he was as lonely as he seemed. Sleep came slowly, exhaustion warring with anxiety and confusion. But eventually, I drifted off to the sound of cattle lowing in the distance and the wind sighing through the rafters, and if I dreamed of storm-gray eyes and a voice like whiskey, I told myself it didn't mean anything at all. I woke to rough shaking and a voice saying, "Rise and shine, new blood, sun's almost up." I jerked awake, disoriented, to find a weather-beaten man with kind eyes and a salt and pepper beard grinning down at me. Behind him stood a younger man, probably in his mid-20s, with sandy hair and an easy smile. "I'm Pete," the older man said. "This here's Samuel. Boss said you'd be joining us. You got a name." Nakai, I sat up, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Through the window, I could see the sky just beginning to lighten. "Well, Nakai, welcome to the Coulter Ranch." Pete tossed me a clean shirt. "Get dressed quick. Boss doesn't like it when breakfast gets cold, and Maria doesn't like it when we're late. You don't want to get on Maria's bad side. She's the cook, and she rules that kitchen with an iron fist." I dressed quickly, pulling on the clothes Coulter had given me. They fit surprisingly well. He must have good eye for measurements. Samuel handed me a worn hat as I finished lacing my boots. "Sun's brutal out here," he explained. "You'll want to keep your head covered." The three of us walked to the main house together, Pete and Samuel keeping up a steady stream of conversation about the day's work ahead. They seemed genuinely friendly, not resentful of a new worker, which was more than I'd expected. The kitchen was warm and fragrant, filled with the smell of coffee, bacon, and fresh bread. A stout woman with steel-gray hair and laugh lines around her eyes looked up from the stove as we entered. "About time," she said, but there was no real heat in it. "Sit down before everything gets cold. You must be Nakai, I'm Maria, welcome." Coulter was already seated at the large wooden table, a cup of coffee in his hands, eyes still shadowed with sleep. He'd removed his hat, revealing dark brown hair that was slightly too long, curling at the collar. He looked up when we entered, his gaze finding mine immediately, and something in my chest tightened. "Morning," he said, voice still rough with sleep. "Sleep all right?" "Yes, thank you." He nodded and turned his attention back to his coffee, but I felt his awareness of me like a physical thing as I took a seat across from him. Maria bustled around, setting down plates piled high with eggs, bacon, potatoes, and thick slices of bread slathered with butter. It was more food than I'd seen in weeks. "Eat up," Pete said, already digging in. "We've got a full day ahead. Boss wants to move the cattle from the south pasture before the weather turns." Coulter nodded. "Storm's coming in tomorrow night. I want them closer to the barn." He glanced at me. "You ever worked cattle?" "Some, not a lot." "You'll learn. Pete and Samuel will show you what to do." He took a sip of his coffee, grey eyes watching me over the rim of the cup. "How are your wrists?" I glanced down at the raw marks the ropes had left. "They're fine." "Maria, you got some of that salve?" "Already set it out in the bunkhouse," Maria replied, giving Coulter an approving look. "I'll make sure he uses it." Something passed between them, some wordless communication that suggested Maria was more than just a cook here. Maybe a surrogate mother figure. Maybe the only person who could tell Coulter what to do. The thought made me almost smile. Breakfast was delicious and filling, the conversation flowing easily between Pete, Samuel, and Maria. Coulter remained mostly quiet, contributing only when directly asked something, his attention seeming to drift somewhere far away. But every so often, I'd catch him looking at me, those intense grey eyes studying me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. It should have made me uncomfortable. Instead, it made me hyper-aware of every movement I made, every breath I took, made me sit up straighter, eat more carefully, as if some part of me wanted to impress him, which was stupid, dangerous. This man had bought me, regardless of how he framed it. I couldn't afford to forget that. After breakfast, we headed out to saddle horses. The morning air was cool and crisp, the sky streaked with pink and gold as the sun climbed higher. Pete and Samuel worked efficiently, clearly comfortable with the routine. I followed their lead, saddling Sage again and checking all the tack twice. Coulter emerged from the barn on his massive black stallion, whose name, I learned, was Midnight, and surveyed the group with a critical eye. "Everyone ready?" "Ready, boss," Pete confirmed. "Then let's move out." We rode toward the south pasture, the land opening up around us in waves of grass and scattered juniper trees. The cattle were scattered across several acres. Contentedly grazing, Coulter positioned us strategically, explaining the plan in short, efficient sentences. We'd push the herd north slowly, keeping them calm, preventing any from breaking away. It was hot, dusty work. The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly, and soon I was soaked with sweat. But there was something almost meditative about it, the rhythm of the work, the communication between horse and rider, the satisfaction of seeing the cattle move exactly where we wanted them. Sage was incredible, anticipating my needs before I even gave the command, responding to the slightest shift in my weight. "You're a natural," Samuel called out, as I successfully turned back 3 cattle that tried to break away from the herd. "Where'd you learn to ride like that?" "My mother," I called back. "She was the best rider in our—" I stopped, the words catching in my throat. "Our tribe, our community, the people who'd turned away when my father took me to live with him after she died." If Coulter heard the break in my voice, he didn't comment on it. But I saw him looking at me again, that same unreadable expression on his face. We worked through the midday heat, stopping only briefly to water the horses and drink from our canteens. Maria had packed food, sandwiches and apples, which we ate in the shade of a large cottonwood tree while the cattle rested. Coulter sat slightly apart from us, his back against the tree trunk, hat pulled low over his eyes, but I didn't think he was sleeping. There was too much tension in his shoulders, too much awareness in the way he occasionally shifted position. "Boss is pleased with you," Pete said quietly, following my gaze. "That's good. He's a fair man, but he doesn't suffer fools or lazy workers." "What's his story?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "He lives in that big house all alone." Pete and Samuel exchanged a look. "Mostly," Samuel said carefully. "He's got his reasons for keeping to himself, lost someone important a few years back, hasn't been the same since." Before I could ask more, Coulter stood, brushing dust from his pants. "Break's over, let's finish this." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of heat and effort. By the time we finally got the herd settled in the north pasture, the sun was beginning its descent and every muscle in my body ached. But it was a good ache, the kind that came from honest work well done. "You did good today," Coulter said, as we rode back to the barn. He'd fallen into step beside me, Midnight's massive frame dwarfing Sage. "Really good." The approval in his voice sent warmth through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Thank you." "Pete's right, you are a natural. Your mother taught you well." He was quiet for a moment. "You miss her." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway, "Every day." He nodded, understanding in the line of his shoulders. "I'm sorry you lost her, and I'm sorry your father," he trailed off, jaw tightening. "You deserved better." Something cracked open inside me at those words. You deserved better. When was the last time anyone had said something like that to me? When was the last time anyone had looked at me and seen something worth caring about? "I don't understand you," I said quietly. "Why you bought me, why you're being kind, what you want from me." Coulter was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Maybe I don't understand it either," he admitted. "But you're here now. And while you're on my land, working for me, I'm going to make damn sure you're treated right. That's all you need to worry about." But it wasn't all I needed to worry about. Because as we rode back to the ranch in the golden light of the setting sun, our horses walking side by side, I realized something that terrified me. I was starting to trust him, starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, he meant what he said. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The storm hit late the following night, rolling in with thunder that shook the bunkhouse walls and lightning that turned the sky white. I woke to the sound of rain hammering the roof, wind howling around the corners of the building like something alive and angry. Pete and Samuel slept through it, both of them snoring peacefully, but I couldn't settle. I'd never liked storms. They reminded me too much of the night my mother died, thunder crashing overhead while I held her hand and felt her slip away. So I lay awake, watching the lightning flash through the windows and tried not to remember. Around midnight, I gave up on sleep entirely. I pulled on my pants and a shirt, intending to maybe read by lamplight or just sit and wait out the storm. But when I looked out the window toward the main house, I saw a light burning in what looked like a study on the second floor. Coulter was awake too. I told myself to stay put, told myself it was none of my business if the boss couldn't sleep. But something pulled at me, maybe curiosity, maybe the same inexplicable connection I'd been feeling since the moment he walked into that trading post. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was pulling on my boots and jacket and heading out into the storm. The rain soaked me instantly, cold and relentless. I ran across the yard, mud sucking at my boots, and pounded on the back door of the main house. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door swung open and Coulter stood there, backlit by lamplight, surprise clear on his face. "Nakai, what the hell?" He grabbed my arm and pulled me inside, shutting the door against the storm. "What's wrong? Is something on fire?" "No, now that I was here, dripping water all over his clean floor, the whole thing seemed absurd. I saw your light. I thought maybe," I trailed off, not sure how to finish. Coulter studied me for a long moment, water dripping from my hair down my face. He was dressed in just a shirt and pants, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. His hair was disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it, and there was a weariness in his eyes that made him look older than he probably was. "You don't like storms," he said finally. It wasn't a question. "My mother died during a storm." The words came out before I could stop them. "I was with her. I can't sleep when it sounds like that night." Something shifted in his expression, understanding, maybe, or recognition. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's get you dried off." He led me through the house, which was beautiful in an understated way, solid furniture, colorful rugs, photographs on the walls. We climbed stairs to the second floor and entered what was clearly his study, a large room dominated by a massive desk, shelves lined with books, and a fireplace where logs crackled and popped. The light I'd seen from outside came from an oil lamp on the desk. Coulter handed me a towel and gestured toward the fire. "Warm up. I'll get you some dry clothes." He disappeared through another door, his bedroom, I assumed, and I stood by the fire, shivering slightly, looking around the room. The books on the shelves were an eclectic mix: novels, poetry, books on ranching and veterinary medicine, even some in what looked like Latin. There were papers scattered across the desk, accounts and letters, all written in a firm, neat hand. And on the mantel, above the fireplace, there was a photograph. I moved closer, studying it. The picture showed Coulter, younger and smiling in a way I'd never seen, his arm around another man who looked to be about the same age. The other man was leaner, with dark hair and an easy grin, and there was something about the way they stood together, close, comfortable, intimate, that made my breath catch. "That was James." Coulter's voice came from behind me, quiet and thick with something that might have been grief. He held out a dry shirt and pants. "My partner, he died 3 years ago." Partner, the word hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I turned to look at him, understanding dawning. "I'm sorry," I said softly. Coulter nodded, his gaze still on the photograph. He was the best person I ever knew. Kind, brave, funny. He saw good in everyone, even when there wasn't any to see. He was quiet for a moment. "We built this ranch together, made a life here where we could just be ourselves without judgment or fear." His jaw tightened. "Then one winter there was an accident, a fall from his horse. He hit his head and just never woke up." My chest ached for him, for the raw pain I could hear under the carefully controlled words. "Is that why you bought me? Because you lost him?" His eyes finally left the photograph and found mine, and what I saw there made my pulse quicken. "Partly," he admitted. "When Dutch told me about a young native man being sold off by his own father, something in me just couldn't let it happen, couldn't let you end up with someone who'd break you." He took a step closer. "James would have done the same thing. He always said we had a responsibility to protect people who couldn't protect themselves." "I can protect myself," I said, but the words came out softer than I intended. "I know you can." Another step closer. We were standing near the fire now, the light dancing across his features, and I realized with a start that he was beautiful. Not in a conventional way. His face was too rough, too weathered, but there was something compelling about him, something that made it hard to look away. But you shouldn't have to do it alone. The thunder crashed overhead, making me flinch. Without thinking, Coulter reached out and steadied me with a hand on my shoulder. His palm was warm through the damp fabric of my shirt, solid and reassuring. "It's all right," he said quietly. "You're safe here." We stood like that for a moment, his hand on my shoulder, the storm raging outside, the fire crackling beside us. I could smell him, leather and pine and something uniquely him, and feel the warmth radiating from his body. My heart was pounding, but not from fear of the storm. This was dangerous. This feeling building in my chest, this awareness of him that made my skin feel too tight. He was my employer, the man who'd bought me. I couldn't afford these feelings, this wanting. But when I looked up and met his eyes, I saw something there that mirrored what I was feeling. Something hungry and longing and desperate that he was trying very hard to keep locked away. "Nakai," he said, my name rough in his throat. You should." Another crack of thunder, and this time I didn't just flinch. I stepped forward, closer to him, seeking shelter in his presence. His other hand came up automatically, steadying me, and suddenly we were standing so close I could count his heartbeats through his shirt. "I'm sorry," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. "For being here, for wanting things I shouldn't want, for making this harder for both of us." "Don't be sorry." His voice had dropped to almost a whisper. "Don't ever be sorry for being human." We stood there, frozen in that moment, the air between us charged with something more powerful than the lightning outside. I could see the war playing out behind his eyes, the want and the fear and the careful control he'd built around himself. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell, and I felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. "You should get changed," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Those wet clothes will make you sick." I took the dry clothes he'd offered earlier, went into the small washroom attached to the study, and changed with shaking hands. When I emerged, Coulter was standing by the window, staring out at the storm, his shoulders rigid with tension. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for the clothes, for everything." He nodded without turning around. "You can stay here until the storm passes. There's a couch by the fire. Try to get some rest." I wanted to say something more, to bridge the gap that had opened between us, but I didn't know what. So I moved to the couch, lay down under the blanket he'd left there, and watched the fire while the storm continued to rage. I must have dozed off eventually, because I woke to find grey dawn light filtering through the windows and Coulter still sitting at his desk, his head resting on his crossed arms. He'd fallen asleep there, papers scattered around him, the lamp burned down to nothing. I stood quietly, watching him sleep. In rest, his face was softer, younger, some of the hardness melted away. I wanted to reach out and brush the hair back from his forehead, wanted to ease the lines of tension even sleep couldn't fully erase. Instead, I draped my blanket over his shoulders and slipped quietly out of the study, leaving him to whatever dreams or nightmares held him. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and fresh. As I walked back to the bunkhouse through puddles that reflected the breaking dawn, I touched my shoulder where his hand had rested and tried not to think about how right it had felt. Tried not to think about how much danger I was in from these feelings that grew stronger every day. Tried not to think about the photograph on the mantel and the way Coulter's voice had gone soft when he said partner. Tried and failed completely. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. I rose before dawn, worked alongside Pete and Samuel through the day, and fell into bed exhausted each night. The work was hard but satisfying, mending fences, tending horses, moving cattle, fixing whatever needed fixing on a ranch this size. My body grew stronger, muscles I didn't know I had becoming defined and capable. But it was the moments with Coulter that I lived for, though I tried desperately not to admit it even to myself. He started teaching me things during the quieter moments, how to doctor a sick calf, how to read the weather by the clouds, how to gentle a skittish horse with patience and soft words. He was a good teacher, patient and thorough, never making me feel stupid when I didn't understand something right away. And sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch him staring at me with that same expression I'd seen the night of the storm, longing and fear, and something fierce that made my breath catch. Maria noticed, of course, she noticed everything. "Boss is different with you around," she said one afternoon while I helped her prepare dinner. It had become my habit to spend time in the kitchen when I could, partly because Maria was good company and partly because the main house felt closer to Coulter than the bunkhouse did. "Different how?" I asked, focusing very hard on peeling the potatoes she'd given me. "Lighter, less haunted." She paused in her stirring to look at me directly. "He's been carrying James's death like a stone around his neck for 3 years, but lately I've seen him smile, heard him laugh. That's because of you." My hands stilled on the potato. "I'm just working off a debt." "MHM, Maria's knowing look said she didn't believe that for a second. "Just be careful, Mijo. Boss is a good man, but he's carrying wounds that haven't healed. And you've got your own healing to do. Sometimes two broken people can help each other. Sometimes they just break each other worse." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that there was nothing between Coulter and me except an employer-employee relationship. But I couldn't lie to Maria, and I definitely couldn't lie to myself anymore. I was falling for him, had maybe been falling for him since that first moment in the trading post when he'd said my name like it mattered, and every day that passed, every moment we spent together made it worse. The breaking point came on a Sunday, our only day off. Pete and Samuel had ridden into town for supplies and entertainment. There was a saloon they liked, a poker game they were eager to join. Maria was visiting her sister, and Coulter, I discovered when I went looking for something to do, was in the barn working on repairing saddles. "Need help?" I asked from the doorway. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face, then softening into something warm. "Sure, grab that leather oil and come here." We worked in companionable silence for a while, the familiar rhythm of the task soothing. The barn smelled like hay and leather and horses, and golden afternoon light streamed through the slats, painting everything in warm tones. I found myself acutely aware of Coulter beside me, the way his hands moved over the leather, competent and sure, the line of his jaw when he concentrated, the way his shirt pulled across his shoulders when he reached for something. "Tell me about your mother," he said suddenly. "What was she like?" The question surprised me, but I found I wanted to answer. She was strong, stubborn, she could outride any man in our tribe and wasn't afraid to prove it. I smiled at the memory. She used to tell me stories about the old ways, about when our people were free to roam wherever we wanted. She taught me to be proud of who I am, even when others tried to make me feel ashamed. "She sounds incredible." She was, my throat tightened. She deserved so much better than dying in a rundown shack married to a man who never loved her the way she deserved. Coulter set down the piece of leather he'd been working on and turned to face me fully. "Hey, look at me." I did, and found those gray eyes intense and sincere. "Your mother got to raise you, got to teach you and love you and make you into the person you are. That's not nothing, Nakai, that's everything." He paused. "And I think she'd be proud of who you've become." He stopped, jaw tightening. "You what?" My heart was pounding. He looked away, conflict clear on his face. "Nothing, forget it." "Coulter." "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, still not looking at me. "The way you've adapted here. The work you do, the person you are, I'm proud to know you." Something in my chest cracked wide open. Before I could stop myself, before I could think about all the reasons it was a terrible idea, I reached out and touched his arm. He went very still, his gaze dropping to where my hand rested on his forearm, then slowly traveling up to meet my eyes. The air between us felt electric, charged with all the things we weren't saying. "Coulter," I said again, barely a whisper. "We can't." His voice was rough, strained. "Nakai, we can't do this." "Why not?" "Because I bought you, because you work for me, because there's a power imbalance that makes anything between us." He broke off, shaking his head. "Because I'm old enough to know better." "You're not that much older than me. What are you, 30, 32? 33, and that's not the point." But he hadn't moved away from my touch. If anything, he'd leaned into it slightly, like a plant seeking sunlight. "The point is you deserve someone who didn't purchase you like livestock, someone who what? Someone who sees me, someone who's kind to me, someone who makes me feel safe for the first time since my mother died." I took a step closer, emboldened by the way his breath hitched. "That's you, Coulter. That's been you from the beginning." "Nako." "Tell me you don't feel it too." My hand slid up his arm to his shoulder, feeling the tension coiled there. "Tell me I'm imagining this thing between us, and I'll walk away right now. I'll work off the debt and leave, and we'll never speak of it again." He was breathing hard now, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for me. "I can't tell you that," he admitted, the words seeming to tear out of him. "God help me, I can't tell you that because it would be a lie." "Then why?" "Because I'm terrified," the words burst out of him, raw and honest. "Because I lost James and it nearly destroyed me. Because you're young and beautiful and deserve so much more than a broken-down rancher with more ghosts than future. Because if I let myself care about you and then lose you, I don't think I'd survive it. Beautiful, he'd called me beautiful. The word hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. You won't lose me, I said, though I had no right to make that promise. You can't know that. No, but I know this. I moved closer still, until we were almost touching, until I could feel the heat radiating off his body. I know that every day I spend here, I feel a little less lost, a little less broken. I know that when you look at me, I feel seen in a way I've never felt before. And I know that whatever this is between us, it's real, it's worth the risk. For a long moment, he just stared at me, war playing out behind his eyes. Then, slowly, like a man in a dream or a nightmare, he lifted his hand and cupped my face, his palm rough and warm against my cheek. You're going to be the death of me, he whispered. Or maybe, I breathed, I'll be what brings you back to life. The last bit of his control shattered. He pulled me against him, one hand sliding into my hair, the other wrapping around my waist, and suddenly we were pressed together, chest to chest, breath mingling. My hands found his shoulders, gripping tight, feeling the solid strength of him. Tell me to stop, he said, his forehead pressed against mine. Tell me this is wrong and I'll stop. Don't stop, I whispered. Please don't stop. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle or hesitant. It was desperate and hungry, 3 weeks of tension finally breaking free. His lips were firm against mine, his beard scratching my skin in a way that made me shiver. I kissed him back with everything I had, pouring all my longing and fear and hope into it, tasting coffee and mint and something uniquely him. We broke apart gasping, both breathing hard, and I saw my own shock reflected in his eyes. But there was wonder too, and a hunger that hadn't been satisfied, only awakened. Nakai, he said, his voice wrecked. Again, I demanded, and pulled him back down to me. This time was slower, deeper, a thorough exploration. His hands roamed my back, mapping the contours, pulling me impossibly closer. My fingers tangled in his hair, finally feeling the silk of it I'd been imagining for weeks. We kissed until I was dizzy with it, until my lips were swollen and my heart was racing, until the world narrowed to just the two of us in a barn filled with golden light. When we finally broke apart for real, Coulter rested his forehead against mine again, his hands still holding me close. What are we doing? He asked quietly. I don't know, but I don't want to stop. The debt. Forget the debt. I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. I don't care about the debt. I care about this, about us. He studied me for a long moment, searching for something. Then his expression softened, some of the fear melting away. I care about you, he admitted, more than I should, more than is smart. Then be stupid with me, I said, making him huff a laugh. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is. I touched his face, running my thumb along his jaw. Maybe we are both overthinking it. He caught my hand, pressed a kiss to my palm that made my breath catch. Or maybe we're both about to make a beautiful mistake. Then let's make it together. Something shifted in his expression, acceptance, maybe, or surrender. He pulled me close again, tucking my head under his chin, and we stood there in the barn as the afternoon light faded into evening, holding each other like we were the only solid things in a shifting world. And maybe we were. Everything changed after that kiss in the barn, and yet nothing changed at all. We still worked together during the day, still maintained a professional distance when Pete and Samuel were around. But now there were stolen moments, his hand brushing mine when we passed tools, his eyes finding me across the corral, small smiles that held secrets only we knew. And at night, after the others had gone to sleep, I'd slip across the yard to the main house where Coulter would be waiting. We'd sit in his study by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in the same space, learning the comfort of companionship. And always, we'd end up kissing, long, slow kisses that made time disappear and filled the empty places inside me with warmth and light. He told me about James during those nights, sharing stories that made me understand what he'd lost. James had been his best friend first, then something more, a love that had grown slowly and surely until Coulter couldn't imagine life without him. He taught me that love doesn't have to look like everyone else's love to be real. Coulter said one night, his arm around my shoulders as we sat on the couch, that two men could build a life together just as strong and true as any other. Do you think, I hesitated, then pushed forward, do you think he'd mind about us? Coulter was quiet for a moment, his hand absently stroking my hair. No, he said finally. James always said I had too much love in me to keep it locked away forever. He'd want me to be happy. He paused, emotion thick in his voice. He'd want me to live, not just survive. I turned to look up at him. Are you happy? He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look young and free. Yeah, he said softly, for the first time in 3 years, I am. The kiss that followed was sweet and slow, a seal on the promise we were making to each other. But not everyone was pleased with the changes they saw. I noticed Pete watching us more carefully, a crease forming between his brows when Coulter smiled at something I said, or when his hand lingered on my shoulder a moment too long. Finally, one afternoon when we were mending fence line alone, Pete confronted me. You and the boss, he said without preamble, that's what's happening, isn't it? My hands stilled on the wire. I don't know what you mean. Don't play dumb, kid. I've got eyes, and I've known Coulter long enough to recognize that look. He wasn't angry exactly, but there was concern in his voice. Just, be careful, all right? He's been through enough. I'm not trying to hurt him, I said quietly. I don't think you are, but hurt happens anyway sometimes. Pete hammered in another post with more force than necessary. Boss is a good man, the best I've ever known. When James died, it broke something in him. He's just starting to heal. I'd hate to see him broken again. So would I admitted. Pete, I care about him, really care about him. This isn't just, it's not nothing to me. Pete studied me for a long moment, then his expression softened slightly. I believe you, kid. Just remember, he's not just your employer. He's not just some man you're fooling around with. He's someone who's already lost everything once. If you're going to be with him, you better mean it. I do, I said, and realized I meant it with every fiber of my being. I mean it. Pete nodded slowly. Then I guess that's all that matters, just take care of each other, yeah. Yeah, I promised, we will. The weather turned cooler as September gave way to October. The leaves on the cottonwood trees blazed gold and red, and the evening air had a bite to it that required warmer clothes and fires in the bunkhouse stove. Coulter started teaching me to read and write better during our evening sessions. I could manage the basics. My mother had taught me that much, but he wanted me to be able to handle accounts, write letters, understand contracts. You won't work for me forever, he said one night, spreading papers across his desk. When the debt is paid and you decide what you want to do next, you'll need these skills. The reminder that this was temporary, that I'd leave eventually, sent a spike of anxiety through me. What if I don't want to leave? He looked up, surprise and hope warring on his face. What? I set down the pen I'd been practicing with. What if I want to stay, not because of the debt, but because I want to be here with you? Coulter stood slowly, moving around the desk to where I sat. He pulled me to my feet, his hands gentle on my arms. Nakai, you're 18 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. You should see the world, figure out who you want to be. I know who I want to be, I interrupted. I want to be someone who wakes up next to you, someone who works this land because it's home, not because I'm obligated. Someone who, I faltered, the words enormous and terrifying, but he deserved the truth. Someone who loves you. His breath caught, eyes going wide. You love me. Yes, I said simply, I love you. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but it's true. I love you, Coulter. For a moment he just stared at me, stunned. Then he was kissing me, deep and desperate, and full of everything he couldn't say out loud. When we finally broke apart, there were tears on his cheeks. I love you too, he whispered, voice breaking. God, Nakai, I love you so much it terrifies me. I wiped away his tears with trembling fingers. Then don't be terrified, just be here with me. I am, he promised. I'm right here. We made our way upstairs to his bedroom that night, crossing a threshold we'd been dancing around for weeks. What happened there was tender and careful, a joining of not just bodies but souls, two broken pieces finding a way to fit together. The details faded to moonlight and whispered words, touches that spoke of reverence and belonging, the breathless discovery of what it meant to be truly seen and truly loved. When the dawn light filtered through the curtains, we lay tangled together, content and whole in a way neither of us had thought possible again. Winter came on fast after that, bringing cold that bit deep and snow that transformed the ranch into something otherworldly and beautiful. We moved the cattle to the winter pastures, chopped endless cords of wood, and prepared for the harsh months ahead. I moved my belongings from the bunkhouse to the main house without discussion or announcement. Pete and Samuel knew, Maria knew, and none of them seemed surprised. I had my own room, officially, for propriety's sake. But most nights I fell asleep in Coulter's arms, safe and warm and home. We settled into a rhythm that felt right, working together during the day, stealing kisses when no one was watching, sharing meals around Maria's table, sitting by the fire in the evenings while Coulter read aloud from books, and I worked on the leather craft he was teaching me. "You planning to stay through winter?" Pete asked me one December afternoon as we hauled hay to the livestock. "I'm planning to stay, period," I replied, "if that's all right with you." Pete grinned. "Kid, I haven't seen the boss this happy since before James died. You're more than all right with me. You're family now." Family, the word settled into my chest like a warm coal. That night, curled up in bed with Coulter, I told him about the conversation. "He called me family," I said, still marveling at it. Coulter's arms tightened around me. "That's because you're family now, Nakai, to all of us, to me." He pressed a kiss to my hair. "This is your home for as long as you want it to be." "Forever then," I said. "I want it to be forever." "Forever," he agreed softly. "I can work with forever." The debt was officially paid off in January, 6 months after I'd arrived. Coulter called me into his study and showed me the ledger, every dollar accounted for, every penny paid. My father's debt was settled, and I was free. "You can go anywhere you want now," Coulter said, though his voice was carefully neutral. "Do anything you want, no obligations." I looked at the ledger, at the neat columns of numbers that represented my freedom, then at the man sitting across from me, the man I loved, the man who'd given me back my life. "I want to stay," I said, "as your partner in every way." His careful control cracked, relief and joy flooding his face. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." I moved around the desk and took his hands. "I love you, Coulter. I love this ranch, this life we're building. I want to stay and make it official, make us official." "I can't marry you," he said quietly, regret in his voice. "Not legally, the law won't." "I don't care about legal," I interrupted. "I care about us, about standing up in front of the people who matter and saying that we choose each other, that we are partners in everything." Coulter stood, pulled me close, and kissed me with a tenderness that made my eyes sting. "Then let's do it," he said. "Let's make our own promises, build our own forever." We held a small ceremony in the spring, when the wildflowers were blooming and the air was soft with promise. Pete and Samuel stood witness, along with Maria, who cried through the entire thing. There was no preacher, no legal document, just the two of us standing under the cottonwood tree where we'd eaten lunch that first day of working cattle together. Coulter took my hands and spoke the words he'd written. "Nakai Ashkiai, you came into my life when I thought I was done living. You reminded me that love isn't something you run out of, that hearts can heal even when you think they're too broken, that home isn't a place but a person. I promise to love you, protect you, stand beside you, and build a life with you that honors both where you've been and where we're going together." I squeezed his hands, my voice steady despite the tears on my cheeks. "Coulter, you saved me when I needed saving, then taught me I was strong enough to save myself. You gave me a home, a family, and a love I never thought I deserved. I promise to love you through every season, to work beside you, to be your partner in all things, and to remind you every single day that you deserve happiness and love and a future full of both." We exchanged rings that Coulter had made himself from silver, simple, beautiful, etched with symbols that represented both our cultures. Then we kissed while our family cheered, and I felt the last broken pieces inside me finally heal over. I woke to the sound of rain on the roof and Coulter's arm heavy across my waist. It was early, the sky just beginning to lighten, but I was content to lie there and listen to him breathe. Even after 2 years, I still sometimes couldn't believe this was real, that this life, this love, this home, all of it was truly mine. Coulter stirred beside me, mumbling something incoherent before his eyes fluttered open. When he saw me watching him, he smiled, that slow, warm smile that still made my heart skip. "Morning," he rumbled, voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I replied, leaning in to kiss him softly. We lay there for a while longer, trading lazy kisses and quiet words, before the demands of ranch life pulled us from bed. There were horses to tend, cattle to check on, 100 tasks that came with running a place this size. But now I did them alongside Coulter, not as his employee, but as his partner in every sense of the word. The ranch was ours now, the decisions made together, the work shared equally. Pete had retired the previous fall, moving to town to live with his daughter, but Samuel stayed on, and we'd hired 2 more hands, young men who reminded me of myself 2 years ago, looking for a place to belong. We gave them the same chance Coulter had given me: fair wages, honest work, and a home where they could be themselves without fear. The main house had changed too. The photographs on the mantel now included one from our ceremony, Coulter and me standing under the cottonwood tree with our hands clasped and joy on our faces. James's picture was still there too, because he would always be a part of Coulter's story, but it no longer felt like a shrine to the past. It felt like an acknowledgement of how love continues, transforms, grows into something new without erasing what came before. That evening, after all the work was done and dinner was finished, Coulter and I stood on the porch and watched the sun set over the land we'd built together. His arm was around my shoulders, my hand rested on his chest, and everything felt exactly right. "Happy?" he asked, like he did sometimes, like he still couldn't quite believe this was real either. "Incredibly," I replied honestly. "You." "More than I ever thought possible." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to love me, for staying, for building this life with me." His voice went soft. "For being my home, Nakai." I turned in his arms to face him fully, reaching up to cup his face. "You were sold to me first," I reminded him with a small smile. "The moment you walked into that trading post and said my name like it mattered. You gave me everything, my freedom, my dignity, my future, but most of all, you gave me yourself, and that's the greatest gift I've ever received." He kissed me then, deep and slow and full of promise. And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, as the land spread out around us beautiful and vast, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Home wasn't the place where you were born. Home wasn't where fate first put you. Home was where you chose to stay, where you were seen and loved and valued, where you could build something real with someone who mattered. Home was here, in this man's arms, on this land we'd claimed together. Home was us, and it always would be. The end. Speech balloon. Did this story touch your heart? If Knack and Coulter's journey moved you, please white heavy check mark like this video to help others find this love story. White heavy check mark subscribe for more emotional LGBTQ plus romance stories. White heavy check mark comment below. What was your favorite moment? Should I continue their story? Thought balloon. What do you want to see next? Their first year as married partners. A challenge that tests their love. How they help other LGBTQ plus people find safety on their ranch. Your support means everything. Thank you for being part of this journey. White Rainbow Blue.